Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. I'm in conversation with Nii Akuetteh. He is an independent analyst of African and international affairs. He's also the former executive director of Africa Action and an adjunct professor in African Studies at Georgetown University. Thank you again for joining us, Nii.
Pleasure to be back.
Nii, so in our earlier segment, we were talking about the U.S. policy towards Boko Haram and Nigeria, as well as the response of the international community in relation to these attacks. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. First and foremost, of course, Boko Haram, by all accounts, arose out of Nigeria. Their concerns were with, they claim, with Nigeria. So I want to say that the central responsibility lies in Nigeria. They spilled over the borders into Chad and Cameroon and even sometimes Niger. So first, it is a Nigerian issue. Second, it is a West African issue. I don't want to forget that. But I also think it is an international and a global issue. And they've been around for 5 years. And I do think, as an activist in Washington, where my focus is to look at developments between Africa and the United States and where how the world treats Africa, I have been unhappy because I don't think the United States in particular and the international community in general have paid the proper kind of attention to helping Nigeria deal with this serious violent extremist insurgency. There are so many angles at which you can come at this from. Here is one. You know, President Obama went to West Point, and he actually said that for the rest of his term, of course, global terrorism was his #1 security issue, and his strategy for that, because it is clear to him the American people don't want him to send U.S. troops overseas massively like George Bush did. So he said, look, my strategy is to help and train other countries, our soldiers, so that they can defeat the terrorists who are our enemies and their enemies. This is a partnership. And he mentioned 5 countries. All of them were in Africa. So even if you are focused on just American interests and security interests in a hard-nosed way, it is in U.S. interest to be helping African countries to deal with these issues. And the issue is very serious in Nigeria. And yet, I feel that U.S. policy has been nonchalant. And all you have to do is compare the attention and the resources and the discussion focused on ISIS, which has been a problem has been in the news less than 1 year. Boko Haram has been in the news and has been killing Nigerians for 5 years. And therefore, I do feel that the international community has put, once again, this for me is a pattern of decades. African issues are not treated with the importance that they deserve, and Boko Haram and Nigeria are a big issue. One other example. This past week, everybody was focused on the attacks in Paris, which were horrendous. 17 innocent people were killed. Thousands have been killed in Nigeria. We haven't seen that kind of media focus. We haven't seen that kind of international focus. So again, it is a Nigeria problem. It is a West Africa problem. It is an Africa problem. But it is also very much a global problem. And I see that the global community, I am convinced, has a double standard.
Right. Nii, what is the regional media doing in terms of covering this issue? Do you feel that it's getting deeper analysis there?
It is getting some. It's certainly, they are certainly covering it more than the international community. On the other hand, none of the countries in Africa, in the region, none of the media organizations has the resources that mainstream American news media have. And so the African media can only do this much. And therefore, if you rely just on them, you don't get enough of it. You don't get enough. So again, because I'm based in Washington, a lot of times what I'm looking at, I'm doing it comparatively. How much attention is being paid to, say, ISIS? versus how much is being paid to Boko Haram. And again, I'm unhappy. It's not just government policy; it is also media lack of media attention.
Right. And what is the response of the Nigerian government to what is going on? I mean, obviously there is a sort of a military response which is evident in the attacks, but what is the sort of the official response in terms of coping with the situation currently?
I think that is a great question because it goes even to the heart of what we were just talking about, the attitude of the international community. So there are two sides to this, to the answer that you are looking for. If you focus on what the Nigerian authorities say, they say they are doing their best. They take the issue seriously. They are doing their best. However, Nigeria, in some ways, is pretty divided. You can look at that as a vigorous democracy because the ruling party and the president gets criticized all the time. So there are a lot of Nigerians who say the government is not doing the right thing. You will hear this phrase all the time. It lacks political will. It doesn't care about the North. It's not addressing the issue. By the way, Nigeria has very important general and presidential elections in exactly 1 month. And therefore, these arguments and issues have become part of the political process. So the government says it is doing its best. There are Nigerians who say, no, the government is not doing what it should have, and it has allowed the problem to fester too long. And then, of course, I was saying, I'm unhappy with the international community's engagement. I don't think they are treating it seriously, but their argument is we are frustrated with the government. Of course, they will tell you this privately. Their real view is they don't think the Nigerian government is doing a good enough job. So until it does a good enough job, their hands are tied. I disagree with that analysis. Because again, I think if you look in the Middle East, if you look at, say, the government of Iraq, the US takes ISIS seriously and says, we are going to help you. We are going to do everything we can. They even force Prime Minister Maliki out. They help them build their military. The kind of help that they are giving Nigeria is minuscule compared to that. And there was one incident. In fact, US relations with Nigeria right now, in my opinion, are wobbly because the Nigerians are not happy. They asked the United States to sell them helicopters which they used to fight Boko Haram, and the United States refused. Now, again, I'm a democracy activist, so I embrace democracy and respect for human rights. But in the middle of the war, when Boko Haram abuses rights far more than anybody can think of, certainly they abuse rights more than the Nigerian military, it seems to me that the international community in general, and US in particular, ought to give the Nigerians the help they need so they can defeat this insurgency before it spreads further. Because right now it's in 3 countries. West Africa is very fragile. If it gets into, it could get into Central African Republic and then South Sudan. It could get west into Mali. And so you've got all of the northern half of Africa actually threatened by this problem. So again, I come back to my point that I wish the international community will stop quibbling and give Nigerians and West Africans the help they need to defeat this problem because it is a very serious problem.
And Nii, finally, what are I guess, the character and the makeup of Boko Haram that the Nigerian government has to understand in order to tackle it?
It seems to me, that there is a bit of speculation as to, who is behind them, who is funding them, where is their money coming from, where their arms coming from. So in many ways, they are shadowy, but we do know that they've been recruiting. Obviously, they have money. They have won most of the engaged battles. Although, their modus operandum is to use suicide bombers, but they also do sometimes attack the military and they win the battles. And there are claims that they are better armed than the Nigeria military. And therefore, the question about exactly who they are and who's funding them is a little bit murky. And this is one of the other issues where I think the international community can do better because, as you mentioned in the intro, back in April, this was what, 9 months ago. After 4 years, they kidnapped so many girls, and it became an international issue. The United States stepped forward, Great Britain stepped forward, France stepped forward, Israel stepped forward. I think even China stepped forward and said, okay, enough is enough. These five major international military powers said they were going to help the Nigerians. This was back 9 months ago. And we don't see any result. The Nigerians complain that these international powers who actually have intelligence capabilities so they can find out where the money is coming from, who these people are, where their arms is coming from. The Nigerians complain that the intelligence is not being shared with them. So we ask the question, what is the cooperation if you are not sharing intelligence and if you won't sell them military equipment to fight what is a serious problem? Again, it looks very different than the situation with fighting ISIS.
Right. Nii, thank you so much for joining us and explaining all of this to us. It's all new unravelings.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.